The risk mitigation monitoring management strategy identified 8 risks and effectively 6 key strategies to address those risks. The first risk was loss of critical data. To address that, they said they would back up the data and store it in different locations, and they expected the team to monitor the situation and cease work in those environments if they became unstable. Next issue they identified was that they needed to meet the deadline. It was critical to meet the deadline, so they limited the project scope and they had a schedule, and they were going to monitor progress against schedule. If they failed to, if they felt they were going to fail to meet the deadline, they were going to request an extension. They used a heavy reliance on meetings. That was their third key strategy. They were going to meet with the client to discuss the project requirements as well as manage change in the project. And if they failed to meet requirements, they were going to notify the client again and have another meeting. The fourth key strategy was to have the end user in mind when designing the user interface. That was to avoid the user rejecting the application. They were going to use remedial action if they failed to meet that requirement later on in the project. So the fifth key strategy was to have more experienced developers to assist less experienced developers because they'd identified a gap in the skill set. So they were going to use peer learning to address that. And the sixth key strategy was to meet and agree on documentation and code commentary. Effectively, they had no standards. They were going to meet and discuss what was required for code commentary as well as documentation. They did identify a need for code commentary, but didn't actually address that as part of the strategy. Sorry. The key strategies described in the case study are not likely to be effective. The main reasons for this is because they lack a trigger point to identify the earliest point to take action. So they tend to be passive strategies rather than active strategies. For example, keep an eye out, monitor, but without giving details of what they were monitoring. The triggers required so that you can actually identify when things are going to get off schedule. You can take remedial action immediately and hopefully get things back on track before it's a real issue. Without that trigger, it's likely that you'll identify the issue too late and you'll fail to be able to make that remedial action. They also don't have anyone made accountable for any of the risks. So they've identified these risks, but they've not made anyone accountable for monitoring them. There's no measures you can use to actually test whether actually you're on target or not. So they need to make those strategies more measurable. And they also need to collect the data that's required so that they can monitor progress against those measures. They also have a heavy reliance on meetings, and they've failed as part of this to specify when they're going to meet, what they're going to meet, who they're going to meet, who's going to meet, what they're going to talk about, what data they require for those meetings to make objective decisions. And they also haven't said when in the project they're likely to meet. So is it before or is it after they commence the project, or is it during the project? So more details are required there. There are a number of alternative solutions they can consider. For the strategy of loss of data, they could implement the source code management system, and they can have multiple environments. And they could also address any current and known stability issues within the environments. To ensure that they meet deadlines, they need to identify the critical path in their schedule. They need to set a trigger. For example, 1 day behind schedule, 2 days behind schedule, whatever it happens to be, and they need to actively monitor against that schedule. So they need to be monitoring that very closely. Because they've got a set deadline, they need to be very careful with their requirements. So an alternative solution for them would be to sign off the requirements at the commencement of the project and implement a change manager process so that they can monitor change and they can assess the impacts of those changes before they actually agree to make those changes to the solution. And for the end user acceptance, they need to collect the user requirements at the commencement of the project as well, include those with the other requirements, and then monitor progress against those requirements during the process so that they don't get to the end and find they've got the wrong solution. For the lack of skills, they need to do a skills assessment at the beginning of the project and identify the resources who need additional training and provide that training and include that in the time frame for the project. Also, with the documentation and code commentary, they need to set standards. So they should have standards set up front. The documentation should be prepared to those standards, and they should require those documents to be signed off against those standards prior to acceptance in the project. Thank you.